Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
Last week was incredibly insightful and well appreciated. So looking forward to what you have to bring this week. To those of you in attendance, feel free to send messages up in the chat, the Q&A. Dave will be monitoring it, as will I. And if something pops up, we'll stop the presentation and address your question. And we will also address them all at the end. So feel free to type away and ask away. But at this time, I'm going to turn myself off and turn the floor back over to Dave. So Dave, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Yeah, good to see everybody back. Thank you for coming to part two. I had a lot of text messages and emails and DMs last time saying it was helpful and it was valuable, which was awesome. I'm super grateful that people found it useful. I also had a ton of people asking questions, which is awesome. I'm glad that it was thought-provoking. So this one is going to be a much more nuts and bolts of like, okay, exactly what do we do? Last week was kind of like theory, outline, big picture stuff. This is like zoom in and give you exactly what I recommend to programs that are listening to this, but also what we do with our athletes, what we do with the actual exercise selection and the cardio routines that we want to work on to get them ready for season. And I'm going to go through the material. It's not as crazy and dense as last time, a lot more exercises, stuff like that than like theory, but I really want to make sure that we leave time at the end to answer everyone's questions because, again, of how many I got, but I think a lot of people are now going to have the complete picture and they're probably going to be like, okay, what do I do with this situation? Or say I have this specific problem or hurdle to run through. I want to make sure I try to deliver as much value as possible and help as much as possible. So feel free to please ask them. There's no question I don't, mind tackling or at least giving you an educated answer on. If it's something it's really outside my area of expertise, I'll just straight up say I don't know and point you to somebody who maybe is better at it or a better expert than me. So this is going to be part two, kind of on, like I said, the nuts and the bolts and actually applying stuff. So what we will do is kind of think about what's the actual application for this. All right. So what we want to do is the best way to approach making a program is to really do it from a point of view of the chunks of the season. Okay. So we want to make sure that we look at what do we do in the off season, which is the most important time to really build these strength conditioning principles in, because you can change things, you can try new things, you can obviously have more wiggle room. And then what are we going to do from the off season is going to be more about maximal strength building, right? We want to build a cardiovascular base. We want to really develop their skills. And we also care about athlete wellness, right? Remember those 4 categories that we talked about last week: the max strength, the cardio, the skills themselves, the athletes wellness, stuff like that. That's our 4 big rocks to tackle. But I think something I see a lot of people make an error in is they're trying to build a lot of strength in the preseason or right before season starts, when in reality, the best time for you to get any strength gains are in the off season, right? So those 3 months that you have, hopefully from the time they get back after finals, they go home, right? Like June, July, August, we talked about, that is really your big 12-week window to try to get somebody quite a bit more stronger. And like we said, the equation for explosive power requires an increase in strength. And we talked about how a hybrid model of lifting and bodyweight stuff is really the best avenue there based on the literature. So we want to really take advantage of the off season. So we're going to spend a lot of time on the off season and the preseason in this. We have so many good experts in here that could talk about the best thing to do in season for routines and preps and all that kind of stuff. I will share with you my thoughts on in-season strength conditioning, but I really don't think it's our best use of time for me to tell you about how to get ready for meets and preps. So you guys are experts in that. I think what I can offer more value in is the off season, the preseason, ramping up into season, and then what we do maintenance care wise. So we'll talk about off season, right? We also will talk about the preseason, which is going to be, again, max power is really going to be our goal here. And there's some really important transitional pieces from the August to September to October piece that, one, because athletes are typically coming back to campus, but 2, because gymnastics is very high risk and you can't afford to be doing things when you're tired and when you're not physically prepared for it. It's really important that we build a bridge from the general aerobic side to the explosive kind of anaerobic window work, but also we build a bridge from the maximal strength to the general power, then to the gymnastics specific power, right? We don't want to go from general strength in the summer and come back and say, tumble as hard as you can to try to get higher tumbling and higher vaults and stuff like that, because there's a high risk that the tissue itself, the joints themselves, the tendons are not conditioned for that. And you might get an injury or something like that. Or it might just be a really low return on investment because of, what you're maybe not doing from a step-by-step. So I think that in September in particular, the first 4 weeks they're back, it's really, really, really important that you do some sort of transitional work. And I'll explain exactly what that means and what the exercises I believe there are. But I think that's something that I see missed. I missed that a lot when I was a younger coach. I would just kind of go right into routines and cardio shape and stuff and power work. But I also would go into heavy plyometrics without preparation. And sometimes a lot of athletes would get shin splints, or they would get Achilles tendonitis, which obviously is a huge conversation that we're having around Achilles tears. Their back would start to hurt, or their wrist would start to hurt. So I think that's really, really important we do that. Okay. Then we'll talk about in season A, which is that first 2 months where you're just kind of getting the rust out and figuring out what skills, what lineups, how do we compete well, all that kind of stuff. But I'll talk a little bit about maintaining the strength and cardio, competing and stuff like that. And then lastly, the tapering and peaking. I'm not going to give you a ton of in-depth nitty-gritty stuff because you guys obviously know your athletes more than me. I can share some thoughts on, what tapering I believe that is to be. But generally, I think a lot of you guys are going to know your athletes better than I am. So you'll be the best person to drive that ship. All right. So what are we doing here with max strength, right? What are we doing? Well, I think the best approach, I've tried a lot of different approaches. I've tried a lot of lifting and I've tried a lot of gymnastics, but it kind of sank right in the middle. I generally recommend in the off season, it's going to be 2 days in the weight room for general lifting. We'll be doing a combination of lower body, upper body, and core. Okay. And we're going to do this, like I said last week, to really focus on the strength base, the maximal strength base is the entire body will be working in nice holistic programs. We're going to train a little bit of strength, but the bias there, but we also might do some plyometrics. We also might do some balance work. We also might do some, a little bit of power work to kind of get them going in the summer, but we're really going to train all athletic qualities. We're not just going to focus on what we were worried about last week, which was just going super, super hard on really heavy weight and really, really heavy sets to failure that might give us not an optimal adaptation that we want. Okay. We're also going to do 3 separate days of gymnastic-specific strength. This is going to be your classic stuff, your core work, your rope climbs, your handstands, the plyo drills, the tumbling drills, right? All the things you need, the bar shaping, that will still always be in our program. A lot of that will be done via drills and skills and specific blocks in the gym, doing circuits and stuff like that. Okay. But we're also never not going to have some daily gymnastics basics, right? So in every warm up that I ever give, it always has some core stuff. It always has some shaping. It always has press handstands, right? My buddy Nick Ruddick is a huge fan of his concept called the Daily Dozen, where you have these categories of things you have to do: handstands, rope climbs, core, shoulder scapular work we talked about last week. I believe that that is well worth 20 minutes of your time every single day in your warm up. And then you have your separate 3 and 2 days based on, what you're doing for the weight room or what you're doing for the gymnastic specific stuff. So obviously in women's, we're going to also include into the gymnastic specific stuff, active flexibility, releve calf work, different things for different event specialists that might need more, twisting and air awareness tramp drills, like that all gets lumped into the physical preparation bucket for me. So yeah, we'll have gymnastics every single day and we will always split it back and forth. But I will say it's important in the off season, you want to build your program around the 2 general days, because those are going to be the most taxing. Those are your best avenues to build strength that becomes explosive power in this population we talked about, who is really probably close to maximizing their gymnastic specific physical preparation. Of course, they have to get back into condition shape and back into gymnastic shape, but their training age for gymnastic skills is enormous compared to how low their training age is for strength and conditioning. So a tiny bit of weight training in the gym, lifting room, is going to make them extraordinarily better. So that's going to be more demanding on their system, because for most people, that's still a shock to their system. They haven't lifted since they were 12, like many other athletes. So you want to build in the summer around that program. As you get to preseason and as you get to in season, it goes the opposite way. You have to give and take more and put more into the gymnastic specific routines and more into tumbling, and pull back on the lifting a little bit, particularly as you approach season, because there's only so much space that you can put water into the cup before it overflows, right? Which would be a performance stall or an injury. So it's a lot on the strength and conditioning side, kind of getting the main part in the summer. And then as we get closer to preseason and in season, we're going to shift the reins back and forth and give a little bit more to the strength and conditioning side, take that away and put that into the gymnastics bucket. So it's really important that you have communication with your team and your coaches, because if you're all not communicating about what's the overall plan and when are we going to give and take, it's going to really be too much on the athletes. Okay. So when you look at a general lower body program, the basic movement patterns that most strength and conditioning coaches are really a fan of are going to be squatting, hinging, split pelvis work, and single leg work. Okay. And then some sort of accessory or prehab work, which might be like calf work or balance work or some deep hip rotator stuff or shoulder rotator cuff, hip rotator cuff stuff. So you're going to build a program on 2 days. You want to see these patterns show up at least once throughout the week. Okay. And I'll show you exactly what these exercises are. And then I'll show you exactly what I mean by building those into the program. So these main patterns, right here are some examples of things, not rocket science, but okay. First, you might have some goblet squats, right? And you might have some single leg weighted hip lifts. So this would be considered a squatting exercise. This is technically a single leg hinging exercise, but this could also be a kettlebell deadlift or a trap bar deadlift if they're conditioned for that. This could be a double leg weighted chain hip lift, but some sort of hinging exercise to strengthen the posterior chain, the hamstrings, and the glutes equally as much as the front. I think that single leg weighted hip lifts are criminally underused in gymnastics. This is, if you look at research, this is the best exercise to develop glute max strength, which is like literally the most active thing in sprinting and jumping and all your tight extension off the floor. So we see people who do a bajillion squats, but they don't do any single hip lifts or direct glute max training. So like these are mandatory. Some version of a hinge, and particularly a hip lift, is mandatory for any gymnast that comes to work out with us in the summer, because we know how important it is. Okay. Third over here, split squats. Most people don't know these. Okay, you can rear foot or front foot elevate split squats to make them challenging on the front leg or the back leg, but some sort of split squat or some elevated split squat is really, really important. And then down here, single leg work. So this is a single leg RDL. This could also be a step up for the front of the body. This could also be a step down, right? There's a lot of different single leg options you could do, but essentially we just want to see these patterns all showing up. And then down here, really important to do calf accessory work. That was one of the main things that Jill Cook, who is a world leading expert in tendon health and in Achilles injuries, and particularly she helps me out with the Achilles tear situation with research. She was saying that, maintaining off-season calf strength and Achilles tendon with some low-level plyometrics is very, very important. So a lot of people are doing high straight leg releve work, which is great for beam, and don't get me wrong, but there's two different calf muscles that both create the Achilles. The soleus muscle is actually doing 66% of the work when you sprint and when you run. So if someone doesn't have a strong calf to support the rest of their body, they might fall apart a little bit. And the soleus, with a bent knee position, like you can see here, that is how, if you look at the floor, people have a decent amount of knee bend, even with their phenomenal tumblers. There's going to be a relative knee bend. So we have to train the soleus and the bent knee calf strength just as much as the straight leg calf strength. So everybody in the summer gets some sort of calf work when they're home. Okay, and then moving on from here, looking at the upper body. Oh, sorry, there we go. So when you look at the upper body, the patterns that are generally used by most people are going to be pushing and pulling in two different planes. So vertical pushing is overhead pressing, and vertical pulling is this way, right, pulling down, and then horizontal pushing is straight ahead, and horizontal pulling is straight towards you. So obviously in the gymnastics world, we can name these as what we know, which is like handstand push-ups, pull-ups, right, like push-ups and some other stuff. But I think, again, the opportunity in the weight room is to do single arm training, which is really, really important, but also is to make sure that we're getting a different type of stimulus that is not like the general body weight strength, right? Pull-ups and handstand push-ups. There's only so many you can do before you have to just keep doing more reps and more reps and more reps to make it hard, right? Versus you can get strong also by adding a little bit of load to people and pulling down the reps quite a bit to get that maximal strength. So you might be able to do a 4x3 with a weighted pull-up instead of doing 4x12 of regular pull-ups, which they can just knock out no problem. We might be able to do a half kneeling dumbbell press and really isolate the shoulder instead of doing 15 handstand push-ups or spotted handstand push-ups. So there's a huge opportunity to develop some of these larger patterns and get a really good bang for your buck. And then a really, really important one is just cuff care, right? Rotator cuff and scapular strength, because most gymnasts, particularly bar specialists, are not getting enough of that. And because they're a little bit more loosey-goosey, we see a lot of rotator cuff injuries, labrum injuries, instability, all that kind of stuff in season, because someone gets really, really strong in their big muscles, the pecs, the lats, which is great, but they don't get equally as strong in their rotator cuff, and they're not using heavy enough weight in the right sets and reps the strength conditioning coach might give them. So their cuff breaks down in season, or their laxity kind of sneaks up on them. So we do a ton of rotator cuff care as well. So just to show you some of these, we have half kneeling dumbbell presses here. So she does 5 dumbbell presses, then she stands up and goes for a overhead walk, just to kind of create what we call dynamic stability. So when you walk with the weight underneath you, your shoulder and your rotator cuff has to kind of react to that. So we love giving these to people because they're a very, very good variation that transfers over to a lot of gymnastic skills. Okay, the opposite of that would be a half kneeling band pull down, or maybe a cable pull down, because again, you can do pull-ups with 2 arms, but it's very easy sometimes to get into the 12, 15, 18 reps with spots instead of doing maybe 5 reps with a slightly heavier weight, and training and getting those large type 2 motor units bigger, those fibers bigger, which we're going to use for explosive power down the road. Okay, floor presses is just another option here that, instead of doing push-ups. Obviously, you could do weighted push-ups, which we do quite a bit of, like with a plate for like 3 to 5 reps. But floor presses are really awesome as well. And then the opposite of that, again, something that is really, really underdone as well is the upper back. I think the direct glute training and upper back training is probably the most common thing I see missed in most people's programs. And it's very, very important. Your shoulder blades and your upper back are the reason why your arms stay over your head and you have a really good blocking power off the table for your Chenko, or you can tap really hard for a Ray or a Shaposh or something like that. That throw and that overhead throwing position, a lot of that comes from your shoulder blades and your delts together. And I think a lot of people don't train that enough. Okay. And then some rotator cuff work here just for the smaller muscles behind to make sure that they get nice and strong as well. All these things are just what we want to see show up inside of an off-season 2-day lifting program. And then moving on from here to the core, I think a lot of people are really good at training core movements. I use core movements for gymnastics specific stuff all the time. Hollow rocks, arch rocks, leg lifts, candlestick lowers on bars, like L holds, you name it. We definitely do it, right? There's tons of stuff that I think is very gymnastic specific shape work, press, handstands, compression work that should be mandatory in everyone's stuff. And we do it daily. I think a lot of the things that the general strength and conditioning world offers are what we call anti-movements. So not flexing into a pike up or a V up position, but anti-extension, right? So you're using your core muscles to prevent that buckling motion, right? So for example, we might do a reverse sled drag because instead of training our lower back muscles to arch, we can also train our lower back muscles to prevent falling forward, right? They're still working really hard, what's called isometrically. But by doing a reverse sled drag, you're training your lower back and you're getting direct loading to your lower back, but it's not the arch up itself. So we need to train both, right? Gymnasts need a tight arch position and a heel drive. That's essential, but they also need that anti-bending position for landings and for other really explosive movements like sprinting, right? A lot of that shows up, and your ability to maintain stiffness in your core is a combination of anti-movements and bracing and breathing together, but also knowing those positions to kind of go together. So I think a lot of times we see the high degree of anterior core leg lifts, hollow rocks, toe taps around the world, candlestick lowers, like you name it, we got it. But we typically don't train the obliques and the side bending muscles enough, and particularly not the compression muscles, which are very important to resist the landing forces. But we also sometimes aren't training these anti-movements enough. And so when we come into the summer and I'm giving people programming, we're writing for them, we're just dropping a little bit of the anti-movements in, and they skyrocket in their core ability and their ability to hold their shape and their ability to stay on the equipment and do well and rebound, because now they're getting a little bit of both. And that's kind of the key takeaway here is you need that general stuff and you need the gymnastics specific stuff. So reverse sled drags, this was obviously filmed in my gym, so we used a band, but we would get a heavier sled and maybe some stuff to go backwards for college athletes, but reverse sled drags, right? And then we also have some physio ball rockers here, which are not earth shattering for most people, but anti-extension training there, just kind of rocking back and forth. We could also do that with some sort of a plank drag through, which we'll show also here. So this is a suitcase carry. So the suitcase carry is really important because as she walks, you can see that when she picks her leg up here, the glute muscles on the side of her leg are trying here to prevent her from tipping over, but also her oblique muscles are working very, very hard to prevent her from tipping over. Cough, cough, balance beam, right? This is why this exercise is great, is because this is helpful to kind of maintain your side to side stability when you hit really heavy on impact and you're off. Some of this does come down to glute and core strength together. So suitcase carries are one of our favorite things to do because you can just, it's like the grocery carrying exercise, right? You can just load up really, really heavy with a low risk of something going wrong. But also these are phenomenal for shoulder as well, because the traction force is pulling on your rotator cuff. Your rotator cuff has to fire and kind of pull that back into the socket. So traction forces are really, really good. This is like a very good kind of 2 to 3 birds, one stone situation. So lots of suitcase carries are things we do. Also sideways sled drags are a really good option as well. And then down here, okay, plank drag throughs are anti-rotation, right? So when she goes to pull the weight through, she has to resist her body rotating down to the ground by using her obliques on the right side to keep her from folding, right? So anti-rotation exercises or anti-rotation press outs are also really, really good to kind of maintain that rotational stability as well. And then lastly, down here, some compression work, right? I talked about farmer's carries, which would be a suitcase carry with 2 weights, but also like weighted dumbbell pogo hops are phenomenal too as well. We use these a lot for the compression aspect of teaching athletes how to brace and how to breathe under that compression loading, which they're going to get with 1.5 punch pike or punch layout or hitting the board for your Chenkos or whatever else they're doing. But also this is a really great way to condition the Achilles and get that stronger and keep the tendon nice and healthy throughout the off season without doing tons and tons of impact loading. Okay. So that's kind of the bigger picture of exercises. And then when you look at the off-season kind of programming, you think, okay, well, how many of those do I do? Like, what do I do? 5? Do I do 9? Do I do 15 sets? How many do I do? And if you look at the research for maximal strength, which is what we're trying to go for here, generally speaking, okay, this is not a hard and fast rule, but 3 to 5 sets of 6 to 10 is really where most of these exercises sit, right? If you're someone who is doing a little bit more single leg based stuff, doing 10 reps of split squats is a whole different level of horrible. So you have to be very careful about how gassed out you are versus if you're doing more of a double leg movement, right? You could easily get into, 10 squats or 10 hip lifts, glute bridges with 2 legs working together. It's not as taxing. There's this concept in the strength conditioning world called the bilateral deficit, which Mike Boyle popularized, is that theoretically, maybe you can lift more on each leg's added together. So how much weight on the right, how much on the left, add that together. You could probably lift more weight with each leg together versus one exercise where 2 legs are working together. So we do work both, but also at the same time, sometimes you might want to pull the reps down because, like I said, getting through 7 to 10 split squats or step ups is really, really challenging. So good rule of thumb that we usually use for people starting off is that 3 to 5, 6 to 10 range. 3 sets of 8 for that first couple of weeks, and maybe bumping up the volume a little bit as they get more into the summer and their second block or into the 6th or 8th week. Generally, that sees pretty good effects without having to change too many variables. The core work, as you guys probably know, will vary a ton, right? Like you have some exercises that are time-based, you have some exercises that are rep-based. So you have to kind of use your critical thinking and logic skills there to make sure you're not giving somebody, 60 reps of an exercise that's just bananas. So here's an example from, again, Kylie's program that is inside the drive that we sent you guys. So on the left, you can see maybe the template that we have for you. So if you're looking to kind of work with a strength coach and you don't have a strength coach who knows gymnastics a ton, or they're new to gymnastics, or you get a new one this summer, you can use these templates as a really good example to say, hey, like this guy I heard a lecture from, he works with a lot of gymnasts and they've had a lot of success, and that's what he says for other college programs. And so maybe we should start with this, and we can put our heads together and figure out what we want to do. But on the left are the patterns. So pairing a squat pattern with an anti-extension core exercise and a one-legged hinge exercise like that kettlebell deadlift with some sort of upper body horizontal pressing, right? Like a floor press, and then doing some sort of one-legged squat with a horizontal pull. That's a pretty good, well-balanced day. Not crazy volume, not crazy intensity, just kind of getting her started. On the right, you see a bunch of exercises. There's many exercises that could go into this, right? For her, she had goblet squat with the stability ball body saw, one-legged hip lift with kettlebells kind of over her hips to make it more challenging with single arm floor presses or bench presses, and then counterbalance one-legged squat off a box. So counterbalance being you press a weight out to help your weight shift back so you can control it a little bit more, and then a one-arm dumbbell row. So this was, she has a larger program, which we'll show, which has like a warm up and some power stuff and, the strength work and some cardio work. But this was the main chunk of one day of her off season for about 6 weeks. Okay. Off-season gymnastics stuff. Like what are they doing inside the gym? And again, Kylie's program, she obviously works out mostly on her own. She gets her coach's guidance, but she's really writing her own gymnastics programs in the summer. And she's also following what her coaches probably send her. But these are just the things that I believe are really important. Nick's kind of daily dozen is wrapped into this. So shoulder opening and shoulder closing with straight arms, some sort of rope climb, some sort of handstand work, some sort of shoulder kind of like rounding and pulling back to kind of work on that scapular motion, and then elevation and depression of the shoulder as well. Some sort of rebounding or stiffness work just to work on body tension, and then anything event specific, right? Active hip flexibility, high toe point releve, some more specific bar strength or in bars, compression work. There's a lot of stuff, but just some examples. I mean, obviously I coach in clubs, so these are club girls who are working on this, but TheraBand opens and closes. So she would do 10 kind of opens this way, flip around and do 10 closes that way, right? Another option here is doing some rope climb work, just the classic, L-hold rope climb. That's not really rocket science for most people. Panel mat jumps are pretty well known. In and out panel mat stiffness jumps, and you maybe increase a half a panel every week until you're getting to the point where you have really good rebounding stuff. Again, this pairs with like the dumbbell pogo jumps, where the dumbbells are on hard surfaces and are general, whereas the maybe plyo jumps are about tuning the spring floor and being able to brace and bounce really well. And then press walks are phenomenal, like line drill to do to warm up. And that's kind of how I do stuff, is when I have people that I'm working with, is we do our general dynamic warm up. We do all that kind of stuff. We might do some plyometric work in the beginning, and we might do like a 5 to 10 minutes of just lines back and forth of handstands and shaping and rolls and inchworms and press walks. Then maybe go do some basics on the event when we warm up. I think everyone here is obviously quite familiar with that kind of classic gymnastic stuff. And so this is an example for Kylie of what I recommended to her to maybe do on her gymnastics specific days. So over here, she would do her warm up, after her, dynamic warm up, she would do all of her like bar strength and do some beam series kicks. Then she would do some laps of handstands with quarter turns, round off step pauses, inchworms, front and back tucks to sticking. And then over here, this was her gymnastics specific strength day. So she had 45 minutes of a block. So deer jumps off a panel, rope climb, side plank leg lift, which is obviously very similar to maybe some general stuff you would see. Roll to single leg panel mat jump, cast handstands on low bar, hollow arch rocks with weights, split sliders for flexibility because her hip was bugging her a little bit and we were rehabbing that. Tall kneeling weight shrugs and some compression work for bars because she does a Maloney. So yeah, just a pretty good example, but it's easier to see it when it's all written out like this and you do it in advance and you pair it up with the general days. So that's kind of the strength-based type stuff like that. And I want to talk a little bit about the general aerobic base for cardio and for gymnastics, because I think there's some confusion around the benefits or the not benefits of certain things. And I know some people are doing some long distance running in the summer. Some people are doing some different, don't ever run at all. There's a lot of mixed opinions here. So I've read a lot of research and I've talked to a lot of like world leading experts and physiology and exercise science and cardiovascular fitness as well, and kind of changed my traditional coaching approach quite a bit. So I don't want to mull anybody's eyes over, but there's three main injury systems that are kind of in our body. So the 0 to 10 second system is called the immediate like fault, or drills, right? So ATP and PCR is kind of how that is working. Right, the middle here is going to be 10 seconds to 60 seconds. This is the short-term system. So people call it lactic system. Some people call it the glycolytic system. The anaerobic system is probably the most widely used name. And then after that, you have 60 seconds to 120 seconds plus, which is like your long haul, right? That's your oxidative or your aerobic system. That's like, running 5 miles or whatever. And the reason gymnastics is so hard, particularly floor and some other events like men's on rings, is because it falls right between these two energy systems of about 60 to 90 seconds. And it starts to be a really challenging mix of your body is flooding with hydrogen ions and acidity, which makes it suck and burn. But also your body is trying to catch up aerobically to also fuel things because it's running out of steam, which is why it's such a challenging sport. So when you look at gymnastics, though, some people would say like, oh, we only need to do sprints and only need to do explosive work. We don't really need aerobic work at all. But when you look at things, obviously like 10 seconds, yes, vault, drills, skills, the short-term system, right? Yes, balance beam, bars, floor, right? But you look at the longer ones, right? Well, what do you think getting through an entire event is at practice, right? What do you think a 45-minute session of repeated turns is, right? How do you recover between turns? Your aerobic system, that huffing and puffing that people have after a hard sequence or a hard routine or something like that, that is your aerobic system. Okay. So the ability to replenish that bursted anaerobic system actually comes from your aerobic system. And not only that, when you're doing an event, when you're doing a really hard floor routine or a bar routine, your body is actively trying to buffer the hydrogen ions and clear out some of that gunky feeling, the metabolic byproducts of that really hard exercise with type 1 or aerobic fibers. So it's called the lactate shuttle theory for people that are geeks and want to look it up. But there's a theory and a pretty good evidence base that during hard explosive work, your body is using the type 1 fibers to try to clear out some of that fatigue. So the long story short here is that if you have a bigger aerobic base, in a very specific way where your entire body is getting conditioned for that aerobic base, you're going to be better at recovering between turns. You're going to recover between drills and turns faster. You'll probably be able to take more turns inside of a practice and also knock on the door of meets, right? You're going to have that person who can recover between floor and their next event faster, or recover between bars and their next event faster because they have a better aerobic base. So I think it's very important to train anaerobic, bursts and routines and half sets and all that kind of stuff. But I think one of the biggest things I see people fail on is they don't set up a good aerobic base in the summer. So they have a really tough time training hard in the preseason and getting enough volume and skills in, and they completely gas out when they try to take back-to-back turns or back-to-back drill sequences. So I caution people of saying, gymnasts don't need to do any aerobic base work. I don't think they should do all aerobic base work, but I also don't think we should neglect it because the science supports that it's very, very important for recovering between turns. A good friend of mine, Chris Hinshaw, is he won the Ironman in Kona a couple of times, and he's one of the best leading experts in many of the spaces for long distance aerobic running, but also like, this high intensity stuff. Him and I have had hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour long chats about what the gymnastics community should be doing to develop this high level of cardiovascular base and how that matters. And so something that we're seeing more and more. And my buddy Dave Alberanis, who works with the college team, he and I talk a lot about, doing floor routines and then getting on an air bike and doing some very light, low level recovery work, because that helps your body clear out some of that fatigue and that acidity to get ready for your next event that you're doing. So there's things like this that are evolving, but I'll share with you where the knowledge that I have sets and how I've applied this to my team. Okay. I think that I said all of them are important. We want to make sure we train everything, right? But that aerobic side is going to help buffer some of the acidity and that terrible feelings when you're in your last corner of a 4-pass or a 3-pass routine. And you're like, Jesus, take the wheel. Even a 2-pass routine, you're dying at the end. The ability to recover through that and safely get through that requires a lot of anaerobic training to learn how to buffer things, but also aerobic training to be able to really handle that a little bit. So if we have a better aerobic base, we can then have a better bursted routine capacity later down the road. Right. So should gymnasts be doing really long runs? I don't know if this is the best approach, right? Many of the people that you guys work with have quite a bit of nagging injuries and a lot of mileage, extra stuff from club and stuff. So I think that running has a time and a place, like sprint work, for example. But I really don't think just sending someone for a long run in the summer is a great idea. And the reason I say that is because gymnastics requires your entire body, right? Your arms, your legs, and your core work at all times. Whether you're doing, beam, you're still squeezing your core and using your arms. Whether you're doing bars, you're still using your legs. And I really think that floor obviously is everything. So the way that these physiology works is you need to train your entire body as an aerobic base to then have an entire body that can handle a routine down the road. If you just run and you just do the long distance running, your legs are getting very, very conditioned, but your arms are not, right? So you're not really getting the best of both worlds. And that's why I think a lot of circuits are really the best approach here. The off season, we do circuits in the gym, which I'll show you. But we also spend a lot of time on the echo bikes or the rogue bikes. We do sled pushes. We do battling ropes. We do a lot of stuff, med ball slams that require the entire body to work really hard. And that helps condition the entire body for the soon to be floor routine that's coming down the road or bar routine. Okay, so here's an example of some stuff that I find is really helpful in the off season. I mean, I obviously, coaching and stuff, have 20 kids to work with, but this is sometimes the best way to approach it with circuits and the groups that you work with, or have someone do it on their own at home and just have a clock going if they're not on campus. So for example, 10 stations, 40 seconds of work, 20 seconds of rest, 2 rounds through, that's 20 minutes. If you have a lot of people, you can do partners and have 2 sets of equipment, but you're alternating between upper body, lower body, core, and extra things because you're rotating what muscle group is working and you're building up global fatigue, right? And as you get farther into the summer, you can work harder things more and more and try to get more on top of that. All right. So here's an example of a template that you guys can find in the drive and that I have used for many, many years now. So just alternating stations of what you want to do, what exercises you think are really, really helpful. You don't have to follow my template, but I think something that your stations well. This one had 12 instead of 10 because I had more kids and we had 30 kids inside of the group. So I screenshotted this from a couple of years ago. But an actual application of this, right? I'm not going to go through all the exercises, but you see here how it's a nice spread of everything. So a working clock, you put on music. I do these with the athletes multiple times throughout the summer. They're pretty terrible, but they're really effective. They're super effective for 20 minutes to get a really good cardiovascular base that doesn't require going on a 5-mile run. So I would encourage people to maybe check that out and think about sprinkling in 1 to 2 of these workouts per week and trying to keep that aerobic base really, really high. And then this would be maybe what that off season in total looks like. Just summarizing so far is you might have, Monday through Saturday here if you don't train on a different day, like we didn't train on Thursday here. So, this is just kind of outlining what we're doing, right? So having the event basics, having the shaping the core work on that light day, not going crazy, but then the second day doing 3 events, doing gymnastic-specific strength training program, doing a circuit and doing some prehab work before. Whereas the next day on Wednesday, we're doing our general strength conditioning program in the weight room. We're not doing cardio that day to save some energy for here. And then maybe we just do some recovery flexibility work. Whereas Friday and Saturday, we would do the alternate B program. So gymnastic-specific B here and the general programming B here. I would consider this day over here, the strength work here, that is the 5th day or the 3rd day of gymnastic specific stuff. It's a lighter day, but really, really all focused on gymnastic specific training and stuff like that. So you would have, your 2 days here and there for the weight room. You'd have your 2 days here and there for the gymnastics programming, and you would fill in all those exercises we just talked about, all the lower body strength, the upper body strength, the core work into the weight room stuff with some accessory work and some maybe plyo work. And then we have in the gymnastic specific days, all the things that you think are really important for your athletes to do, you would fill those all in those 2 days and have those again every day in the warm up has some sort of, core basics, handstands, rope climbs, all that kind of stuff. So I know it's a lot to get in, but if you plan these things in advance and talk with your strength coaches, it's incredible how much you can get done when you really have a detailed plan. That's why I live and die by binders, because I need to see it all in one spot. All right. So let's talk about the preseason now, kind of this max power phase, which everyone is kind of oriented at, right? So what we want to do here is probably do 1 to 2 days of general lifting or strength work in the weight room. The reason I say that is because some places have a phenomenal strength coach relationship and they're able to do 2 days where they can still manage the volume well and not make them so sore or so tired in practice they can't get ready for routines. If you have a great relationship and you can do 2 days, I would say do that. If you are maybe in a position where you don't have a great relationship with your strength coach, it's new, it's someone you don't really think understands gymnastics, and you have a bad experience where they just buried your athletes in preseason, maybe just do 1 day and take on 1 more day of the power training on your own. It's whatever fits your team and your schedule. But we're really focused on speed and velocity and that explosive power work, or rate of force development it's called. We do a lot of med ball work. We do a lot of sprint work. We do a lot of jump work, a lot of plyos, a lot of speed sled work. Like, this is really where you're trying to get intensity dial to go through the roof. And you notice that all those exercises I just listed are not gymnastic specific power stuff, right? We're going to have power work in gymnastics as well, but the majority of your focus, particularly in the first month, should really be about general force, right? You can slam a med ball really, really hard and have a really, really low risk of something going bad. You cannot tumble as hard as you possibly can into a double back for a high set. The risk of something going wrong when someone's fresh back in September is much higher. So I try to make that first block all about general power and general anaerobic work, as we'll talk about. We're still going to do a lot of gymnastic specific strength work. We'll probably, like I said, 3 or 4, depending on your strength conditioning relationship in the weight room. That will all be about the stuff you guys know all so well. So skill work, event power work, putting connections together, power tumbling, all that kind of stuff will come after we get into the general base a little bit. But it's really going to be about aiming towards gymnastic specific drill work and drill power work. So drills, skills, specific days. And again, that daily dozen that I was talking about is going to always kind of have a place there. So what does it look like with the general stuff? Same patterns: squat, hinge, split pelvis, single leg, but you see the exercises changed. So now maybe we're doing seated squat jumps, we're doing broad jumps, we're doing split squat jumps, speed sled work, step up, skip jumps, all the really explosive, fast, ballistic stuff. We're trying to get intensity. We might ramp up the amount of hip accessory care we're doing because these joints are typically going to be doing a lot of extra work. So show a few examples of these. So this might be in the weight room for some people. This is just videos I took in our gym because I needed the backdrop to be the same for all of them. But this might be seated dumbbell jumps in the weight room with your athletes and a strength coach. Repeated broad jumps here down the turf. So just working on explosive hinge loading and jumping as far as you can. So we have vertical force over here and we have horizontal force over here, which both have a lot of really important values. Step up rebounders here. So split squat rebounders, right? On a spring floor, you could do it on the floor as well, but split squat rebounders are the same split pelvis pattern that comes along with a split squat, but now we're doing it in a much more explosive way to try to get those arms and those legs driving. And then here we have just some high skip work. We also do a lot of step up skips off of like a 12-inch box. We do a lot of sprint sled work. We do a lot of ballistic high jumps and skips inside of our warm-ups to try to really teach the athlete to go hard. And then we have some accessory work here with side plank clamshells, which is called super clam. So this entire focus of the weight room is really about, ramping up the intensity to try to unlock, the strength base in the summer. The hope is that you've added strength, but also the type 2 large motor units that are really explosive. Those can now be used because they're stronger and more available to do some of this explosive power work. That is really the goal that we're having here a little bit. Okay, and then for the upper body, when we look at this, sorry about that. So now what are we doing for our same kind of patterns, but now we're using our shoulders in different ways, right? Vertical pushing, right? I really, really, really love med ball work for gymnasts because it's very, very easy to express high force. It's a very low learning curve. So athletes can very easily be coached up in a couple sessions and know how to do this really well. And it's very, very safe, right? So vertical pushing, right? We might do a reverse med ball throw, a seated overhead med ball throw to work on explosive setting power, getting back to the table, shaposh, Maloney, all that kind of stuff. Those back handsprings whipping to get farther down the floor. That all comes from that explosive overhead movement. If we sit someone down, we can have much more of the arms and core working and less of the legs working, okay? The opposite of that would be a med ball slam, right? So slamming between your feet for closing on, giants and closing on kip cast handstands, all the things that I know that a lot of people are trying to get at. Pushing this way, you can do med ball chest passes to work on the explosive chest muscles to then block off the table or rebound down and snap off the ground. And horizontal pulling, we really like doing sled pulling. So put a rope around a sled, hand over hand pulling. It's very good to condition the lower back, but also it really strengthens the lats for a lot of power and explosive output that way. Accessory work, same kind of idea as before, is trying to fill in the gaps of things that you maybe be worried about. A lot of people are usually worried about lower body or upper body flexibility. So we might do some split slider eccentrics or some chin up negative lowers to make sure that as we do a lot more of explosive work, we're not making the lat stiff, the groin stiff, the quad stiff. So we're adding in a lot of extra accessory work a little bit. I know split sliders is in the wrong spot. It should be lower body. I apologize, but I meant to say chin up lowers with negative eccentrics. So that helps to stretch the lats out pretty well. All right, so just some examples here. So this is the seated overhead med ball throw. So Heather and Hannah goes back here. Heather is sitting here. So Heather is just throwing as hard as she can. It's about like a 6 to 8 pound med ball. It's a lower weight intentionally. So she can throw very, very hard. If you put a really heavy med ball in their hands, they can't really be explosive and it's too hard. So that would be seated med ball slams. And then we have standing med ball slams here. So that was seated throws. This is slams. So explosive slams down here. Again, that closing angle pain, that closing angle push to try to make sure that they're explosive into the floor. And you literally tell that person, I want you to try to put a hole in the ground. Like if you break the med ball, you win, right? That's how hard we want that person to throw. Here's the step 2 chest pass. Just working on explosive power. These are usually in the warm up and in the very beginning of the strength conditioning side inside the weight room. And then these are video from Champion of Courtney doing the hand over hand sled pushes here. So we load this sled up with a little bit of weight and she's just working on really explosive pulls as hard as she can. Lastly, down here, the split sliders, like I said, they should be in the lower body section, but I forgot to switch it. So here it is. This is just for flexibility stuff. As again, many people might know these a little bit. All right. And then next, looking at some of the plyometric ramp up that we have, right? You may have noticed that the core did not specifically have power work because you can see a lot of that stuff is built into the upper and lower body. We might do some extra like med ball work and some extra core work in the general side, but also the gymnastic specific side tends to have a lot of that like speed V-ups and really explosive kipping and stuff. So we don't specifically train for explosive core work outside of med ball work, which has a ton of core work because usually there's a better use of our time in the weight training room. So plyometrics really important to ramp your way up over the course of the start of the season to make sure, we're slowly conditioning the shins, we're slowly conditioning the ankles and the Achilles. So we start with small to medium to large force, and then we go from double leg to single leg to make it a little bit harder, one direction to multiple directions. And then, obviously jumping and landing, teaching them to squat properly, land properly, all that kind of good jazz. We do this with hurdle hops, box jumps, depth jumps, sprint work, all that kind of stuff. And then here you'll see some examples. This is Riley. Riley was going through a lot of this, so she was a perfect example, but just some hurdles back and forth this way, just working on rebounding and stiffness and stuff. In the middle, you can see Court, who is doing some single leg rebounding work over the hurdles. And then we have this 3-way plyo drill. Again, these are usually in someone's warm up as they get ready for their lift. And then here we have some box jumps and some depth jumps. So drop down, jump as high as you can. So a little bit of plyometric work and a little bit of, again, lower body force explosive work. So step to pull, step to jump, all that good jazz. All right. And then kind of moving on to here. So the general side as well. How many sets and reps do you want to do for the power based work? Well, most research is actually going to support a couple less sets. So maybe 2 to 3, 3 to 4, but you only probably want to do about 3 to 5 reps of some of the explosive stuff, the med ball throws, the jumps, the sprinting work, because as the intention goes up, the rep should go down because of how hard it is, right? The maximal intention as you're training that short bursted anaerobic system or that PCR system, you need more rest in between so the aerobic system can help recover the anaerobic system. So you can't do back-to-back sprints or back-to-back med ball sets and expect someone to have really, really high intensity because of how tiring it is. So you want to have other exercises that rotate through or have them take an active recovery a little bit. So really, really important for sprints, jumps, plyos, and med ball and stuff like that. The low impact plyos, you're probably starting in the 10 to 15 rep range because it's not as demanding on their body. Whereas as you get into medium and high plyos, you really want to be careful here. You only want to maybe do 3 to 5 reps because of how much force there is on their body. So I would never give somebody 15 depth jumps, right? Because there's no way after 5 reps, their intention is going to be high and the output's going to be high. And the risk goes up as you get higher and higher into your fatigue level. So I wouldn't want to dump 15 reps of a really explosive plyo movement with them. Okay, so here's an example of, again, Kylie's program. So she started with these very linear skips and lateral skips warming up here, but then she did a fake med ball slam to overhead slam, which is just a progressed variation. You don't let go of the ball, then you slam the second time to work on the deceleration of landing. Seated weighted vertical jumps with dumbbells, lateral pogo hops, and then a tall plank exhale because we're trying to use something here to help recover her body so she has more time to be recovered for these explosive exercises. And then over here, side to side med ball, overhead slam, split stance, broad jump. So starting from split pelvis to 1. and then lateral bound, quick to stick, which is what you saw Courtney doing. And then again, an exercise down here as an accessory piece to give her body time to recover for the aerobic, the explosive stuff that was going on in the weight room. All right. Gymnastic specific stuff. I could give you 5,000 drills. You could give me 5,000 back. There's so many more knowledgeable people in here that could tell me gymnastic specific power work they like to do. But some examples: snap down rebounders on panel mats, in and out panel mat jumps, step to front tucks, arch hollow snaps on high bar, round off in and outs. There's like a bajillion things you could do tumbling up the resis. That's definitely your area of expertise. And in the gym, you're going to be doing these things in your warm up, your event warm ups, your gymnastics conditioning is going to have a lot of this stuff in it. I will show you some of my favorites though. So these snap down rebounder drills. So snapping down and rebounding back up to a panel. It's great for air awareness, where to look for your tumbling, but also it's a very good shape change snapping drill. I think it's very, very easy for most people to do well. And then over here, just stepping to front tucks. So stepping off the block and front tucks to stick, very classic gymnastics college. I think I did 5 to 10 of these every day for all 4 years of college that I was in there, along with snap down back tucks, but pretty easy for most people to do. Vault trainer work, a lot of stuff here. Again, and just trying to work on upper body power and that kind of scooping mechanism. For some people, it's Yurchenko uphill to a stack mat with a nice explosive kick through. And then bars, probably the most classic power drill ever is just, fish taps, they call them, or arch hollow taps. So again, that's you guys are so good at that. I don't want to steal your thunder at all. So here's an example of this. Again, you might do this in your warm-up. Your warm-ups, all your stuff here, your lines, your plyos, your bouncing, and then you might have on events, you might have a couple of different side stations for all this power work or all this kind of snapping action. So everybody is going to have a different kind of research base or special sauce they want to do for a recipe to make that work. And it varies by, athlete, right? Some athletes that are really different skill profiles will need different drills, obviously. So you'll be mixing and matching as you need. So let's talk about this though. So this is something I hinted on at the beginning, but the biggest mistake that I see people make is they come back in the preseason in September and they start right away on the cardio plyo based impact, right? Panel mat lines and jumps and running and circuits that are really a lot of impact. There's a time and a place to develop that impact tolerance. But I think if we ask someone to start doing half routines without setting up the anaerobic system to handle that fatigue and handle that crappy feeling, it's a really high risk, right? So it's a high risk of a poor performance. It's a high risk of someone landing short or having a gassed out dismount and falling apart. It's a lot of extra mileage on their body when they already typically are maxing out their career. And it's terrifying, right? Standing in that corner and doing your last pass when you're not quite conditioned yet is really terrifying. So you have to, there's a time and a place to develop mental toughness when you're tired to push through, but there are smarter ways, I think, for us to develop that. And it's not saying that I don't think we should train, do your bar routine, go into the pit and do your last pass or your last dismount to the pit, or do three passes of your routine and go to the rod strip. Like I believe in that wholeheartedly, and I'll show you that. But I think we really want to make sure we understand the physiology of how we train somebody to get ready to handle that. The way that I do this is over 2 to 4 weeks, starting in the end of the summer to the beginning of maybe September, October, is we might do 2 weeks of just general crappiness in an aerobic conditioning session. If you've ever done workouts like this, I've done every single one of the workouts you're going to see. They're horrible if you really know how to push them the right way, and they have a great training effect. So 30 seconds of plate hops, up and up, back and down off a plate to work your quick twitch calf fibers. You run right over after 30 seconds and do med ball slams or rope slams for 30 seconds. Then you get on a really light sled and you just push a sled around the floor for 30 seconds. And after 90 seconds of that, which is that window we're training in, you're pretty gassed, right? And so you do that with maybe 2 or 3 partners, so you recover while they go. After that, we might make it a little bit harder by doing 30 seconds of squat jumps, 30 seconds of jump cast handstands on the floor like a drill, and then you hop on the bike and go hard for 30 seconds. That will annihilate you, right? But it's not dangerous. It's in terms of a dismount or floor, but it's really getting good conditioning up, because you're going to do the exact same type of crappy workout when you go to do your floor routine. It's the exact same energy system. And again, you'll notice the whole body is working, right? Like the plate hops, the med ball slams, and the sled are upper body, lower body, and core, right? The squat jumps, the jump cast handstands, the bike sprints with your arms are your whole body working. So we're teaching the entire body to work very hard, and what they call blood lactate levels to spike, because that's what happens in gymnastics when you're swinging on bars, squeezing your whole body as tight as you can, right? That is the definition of a whole body anaerobic power workout. So then after that happens, we might then start to transition over to our floor routine stuff. So tumble down into a resi or a pit, run back, do another tumbling pass, and then do broad jumps down the floor, walk 1 lap of handstand walks, and then get back in line, catch your breath while your teammate goes. You might put a running clock for 20 minutes so that every athlete gets through about 5 times. But as they get more and more tired, they train themselves to be tired and still have good technique into the pit, into the resi pit, right? To do their harder passes without the risk of something going, terrible on the hard floor and landing short. So we would do that for 2 weeks. And then finally, as we're doing this 2 weeks, right, we're also mixing in the sled pass routines, the water down sets, the basic sets, all that kind of stuff is mixed in here because this is going to set them up really, really well for half sets or their dance throughs or all that kind of stuff. So I've worked with a lot of programs who have tried this and have really, really good success. And I personally, for me, I've seen this be enormously helpful when somebody is able to finally do this because they're not going from 0 to, oh my God, I hope I don't land on my head on a double pike, or I hope I don't peel off on my bar routine. Okay, so some long intervals, just some more ideas here. You might do, 10 jumping lunges, and then you might do sled push, sled pull, 10 med ball slams and bear crawl, and you would have 3 people going at the same time, and then maybe behind them is groups of 4, so 12 kids were in this group. I'll show in the video. But one person will do a farmer carry after they do this working set because they have to learn how to control their breathing, control their core, and stay tight when they're really, really tired. That is a really important skill of floor routines and of beam routines to do, and then you recover for 2 people while you go. It makes it about a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio or 1-to-3. So I'll show this video because I have it. So you'll see Liv, just total rock star here, right? Again, I've done this workout. It's very hard. So 10 jumping lunges. She grabs the rope and she will pull down and then she will push back. She's a beast. I love that kid. She's amazing. So she pushes down, she pulls back, right? We did some leg stuff and now we're doing some more leg push pull, but she's also working that upper body towing. She runs back, she does another one. I'm not going to bore you. And then after that, she runs down to the end and she does med ball work, right? So 10 med ball slams, then she will bear crawl back. Again, this is so freaking hard. This is so hard cardiovascular wise, but this is very, very low risk. Like I'm not worried about her hurting herself. She's just tired, right? She's just exhausted. So she would go, then she grabs 2 kettlebells, does farmer carries, and then her 2 partners would go while she does that. So really good example of something I would do in September to kind of condition them a little bit. And then also you can see what we had here. We talked about run down, 1 back tumbling pass, you sprint back, 1 floor tumbling pass to your ability level. For some kids that I coach, that's a back tuck. For other kids, it's a double back. For you guys, it might be a double pike or a double layout or a full in. I have no idea. And then they run back and maybe do a front pass if they have it. Then they would do 1 lap of broad jumps down the floor, 1 lap of handstand walking down the floor, and 1 lap of walking lunges, because we're replicating the entire body working really, really hard. In our gym, we have 2 sets into the pit, or we have a rod strip and another one set up. You guys can have whatever you have access to, but some sort of softer tumbling to get their body ready. Here's an example. Keep in mind, I'm in a club. So she does a front full or a front Rudy or whatever she's working on. Julia would get out here. That was her second pass, I believe. So she would do 1, run back, then she would go again. Emily is over here doing her thing, but she would do her broad jumps down and then she would turn around and she would come back doing her handstand walks. Right. And so she does her handstand walks while everybody else is going over here. And then, she gets back in line and she does her thing. So we put a running clock for 20 minutes. And they would work through this. And the 4th, the 5th one starts to get really, really crappy. If you have to water it down for safety to a layout, I tell them to do that. But that's a really good way to train floor to bridge from the off season to the in season. And then bars is very important to this too as well, because again, your arms are the main thing accumulating fatigue. So if we don't train the arms to be the main thing working and then ask the legs to work really hard in a dismount, the risk of an injury, particularly a knee injury, is high because someone's not conditioned for that. My same buddy, Chris, who works a lot of like professional surfers, says that one of the things that happens in surfing is they paddle out to a hard wave and their arms get so tired, they stand up on their board and the blood lactate floods to their legs and they get wobbly legs. And a lot of surfers tear their ACL because their legs are so jelly when they stand up because your body's looking for a way to clear that acidity. I don't have research to prove it, but I think a lot of gymnasts possibly don't have great bar landings or have risky bar landings because maybe they're not conditioning themselves to make their arms do all the work and their legs buffer some of the acidity. They have really jello legs when they land, or they go to their next event and they're carrying some of that fatigue with them. So working theory, but very, very important to brew on. So it'd be the opposite here, right? They would hop up and do 3 sets of kip cast handstands, right? You guys are higher level than the kids I worked with. So maybe they would do in bars, kip cast handstand toe on, kip cast handstand toe on, kip cast handstand toe on, jump to high bar, kip cast handstand, giant, pop down. My kids just did kip cast handstands, then jumped to high bar and did tap swings. And then they run over, they do 10 push-ups as hard as they can, 10 med ball slams, which gasses their arms out. And they sprint 3 times to replicate, what will happen with fatigue when they're down the road. So here's an example. It is, for me, it is labor intensive because my kids are a little bit younger and still working on their cast handstands. You guys might have no problem with it all spotting, but she does 3. And then she runs over to somewhere over here, you'll see it, but she grabs a spot to do push-ups. And then she does med ball work too as well. And I'm spotting these people here while they go, and then they're going to go from here, and they're going to do their med ball stuff, then find the rod strip down here, and they will do their sprints. You'll see them running in a second. So yep, there she goes. So yeah, you would just cycle through that. They come back, they chalk up, they catch their breath as if they were wading into the floor lineup as well. So these, again, mega effective to get somebody bridged from, oh my God, I haven't done bars connected at all, as you're developing skill combinations. And then it becomes, okay, I can breathe through a hard dismount here. All right. So what about in season? I'm just going to blitz through this very quickly to round it out, because again, a lot of people have great stuff here. So it depends on your environment. It depends on how good your relationship is with your strength coach, or whether they're going to be, open to doing kind of the maintenance care, active recovery type approach. And then, the wellness-based prehab. I don't think you can definitely lift in season to maintain strength. I believe in that. But if you're trying to maintain your strength and your power, you don't need to crush kids in volume. You don't need to crush kids in a lot of heavy lifting. It's just really explosive, low level sets. Like some of the athletes that come in for us in season who lift with us, the national team athletes, the college athletes who maybe, the national team athletes, the high level JO kids are looking at college. They might do like a 3x3 velocity-based training, high intent squat, right? Or a explosive sled push for 5 reps, right? They're not doing their high volume. So we add in so much rotator cuff stuff, flexibility stuff, recovery stuff. Tons of that is really what's important, because again, there's so much intensity with season that you really are riding the red line already of putting somebody over into a dangerous spot. So lower body prehab ideas, there's a bajillion here that we have, but a lot of soft tissue stuff for their calves and their quads, a lot of eccentrics. The seated calf work is really good to maintain. Shin strength, hip work, side plank clamshells, eccentric stuff, anything they've gotten from their PT or their AT that they have class till 250 and practice at 230 and they can't do their prehab work or come to the training room. So all that stuff can maybe get tossed if the AT can talk with the strength coach or come to the strength conditioning session and do it together. That's what I've seen work best. Okay. And then lower body and then upper body prehab. So soft tissue work for their lats, their pecs, their teres major, adding in that upper body rowing stuff, trying to do the rotator cuff stuff, Turkish get-ups, like a lot of get-up work is really, really good for dynamic stability in season. And then again, anything that they need to do from AT or a PT perspective. Core work, hip and shoulder flexibility work is protecting the core. I believe, my boss has shown this in the MLB, the more you do your sport, the tighter you get and the more tired you get. So in throwers, if they throw, their shoulder gets stiff. We've measured this. So we have a study going right now. We measured 8 Division I athletes, men and women from a bunch of different schools on flexibility and strength and range of motion and jump testing. And we're going to check them in May when they come back to us. My theory, my hypothesis is that their strength will go down slightly because they're fatigued and they're tired, and that their range of motion and stiffness will go down as well. So they'll get less range of motion and more stiff because a muscular soft tissue is overworked. So in season, the thought of that paper to hopefully help show is that we need in-season soft tissue care and flexibility work from ATs and self-work and S&C to help combat some of that from developing so much that they're starting to get more back pressure or more back pain. So loaded carry work, core work, sled push work, really good to maintain some of that. Again, core bracing, core breathing stuff, very low level, very low intensity, but it does help quite a bit because there's only so much time you guys have in the gym. You're just focused on routines. References here for all the geeks like me out there. If anyone has any questions, I will happily answer. I don't think I saw stuff in the chat, so either it was really helpful or you guys thought that sucked. So.
No, I can tell you because I was having a side chat with one of my coaching friends in here, trying to take notes on everything you're doing and the videos and the screenshots. We're all trying to figure out how can we replicate that in our own gyms. A lot of what you were doing. So there was definitely, I think, a high level of people just truly absorbing and paying attention. So
cool. Yeah.
At this time, let's open the floor. So if you guys have questions, raise your hand, throw it in the chat. Something you want to see again?
Where does the circuits fit into the practice in preseason? So I'm assuming you mean the cardio practice, the cardio. Yeah. Okay. So in the off season, the circuits 2 days per week are inside the main training stuff. We'll do for 20 minutes. Same thing happens for, it's okay, Ward. In the preseason, during the events, I'm developing some basics on the events. So the kip cast handstand connections, the longer endurance sets, and usually at the end of the day, the end of the workout is when we'll do our hard strength, and we'll do our anything in the aerobic category particularly is it's carnage, man. It's if you're doing it right, it's hard, man. It's so you cannot function after. So when we do some of the sled push work and the sprint work and all that kind of stuff, and I've done it and been annihilated for like a day after, it's so hard on their body. I highly recommend doing that at the very end of practice and finishing with that, because you're not going to have much left to work with after. And you want, so the goal of that in preseason, like that's one of the most important things. It's developing your skill combinations, getting ready for routines from a technical point of view. But the explosive power work and the cardiovascular work for the aerobic system, the anaerobic system, is the most important, right? So you want to save and put your energy into that basket, particularly in September when you get back. So I sometimes will do a lot of skill work, a lot of drill work in September, and I'll intentionally make like Tuesday, Friday, because we would train 5 days in a row and take weekends off. I would make Tuesday and Friday are like real hard days for cardio and strength. So Friday afternoon, the last thing they're going to do is just a really high intensity, pretty brutal anaerobic repeat workout or long interval work. So yeah, I would say probably Tuesday, Friday, if you can swing it, or whatever day you have a day off after, that's when I would recommend the cardio stuff in the preseason. As you get later into preseason, October, November, you're dialing back on those cardio things because the routines become the cardio stuff, right? Like 2 bar sets, 3 bar sets, 2 floor routines becomes the cardiovascular work. So if you go nuts on cardio for the routines, and then you ask someone to then go do one of those really hard lactate workouts, one, it's probably not going to have a good return on investment because you don't have stuff to work with, like you're gassed, right? You're literally dead. But also you probably are not going to have a great outcome because you've tossed so much at them at once that it's probably going to be a little bit too high of them to work with. So sometimes people will do those in the gym, and it's very, very effective. Other times they want to just work on skills and routines. And I've talked to programs where the strength coaches are really in tune with what they want to do, and they'll do a version of it in the weight room, right? They'll do the bike sprints, the med ball slams, the stuff that can get gassed out there after practice. It's really, there's no right answer. It's about communication with the strength coach and stuff like that about, okay, these 2 days, we want to go really hard in the gym. So we can't go really hard on cardio, but Tuesday, Friday, we do have the opportunity to go a little bit less intense on gymnastic stuff and kind of save some of our save our hands, so to speak, for the cardio, because that's such an important aspect of developing the athletes physically.
Awesome.
No
We got one in the Q&A from Carrie.
Okay.
For programs that cannot pay for summer school and housing and send their student athletes home for the summer, do you suggest the program all happens in the gym, or set up items for gym and weight room? The struggle is getting that buy-in when we aren't working with them and sending them home with a program to do on their own. And their access to facilities will be different at home as it is on campus.
Yeah. Really good question. So the first thing, Carrie, that I want to point on there is the buy-in, because the buy-in is a huge part of it. You could write the best program in the world, but if you don't have buy-in from your athletes, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So I've read a lot of books on the science of helping people change and their ideas about what makes them motivated to change. And I think what you have to do is you have to ask the athlete, what do you want out of next season? What do you want of gymnastics? And oftentimes it's what I call an emotional catalyst. They're very upset with the way something went in season. They got hurt. They didn't have the performances they want. They didn't make lineup, whatever, who knows? It's a billion different exercises or ideas there. So you ask the athletes, what do you want out of next March, next April, next May? Usually it's, I don't want to hurt as much. I want to perform and hit my routines. I want to make lineup. I want to feel happy with my teammates. Say, okay, all of those goals require good strength and conditioning. So if you want that to be your outcome next year, we need to go all the way back of when we have the most opportunity to make a big difference, which is in the beginning of the summer. The beginning of the summer coming up in May and June, after a proper break and a deload, like I said, 2 weeks off and 2 weeks of ramp up, that is your opportunity to be better in postseason, right? If you're upset with the injuries, if you're upset with your performance, if you always fall apart in April and you want to make it to blank, whatever it is, that is where you need to really focus here. So that's how I develop buy-in. And we, like, whenever the athletes, we have 20 to 30 gymnasts that come to us in the summer and want to work with us. And we have a lot more club kids too. We just sit down with them honestly. It's like, what do you want out of next year? What is your goal? Why are you in gymnastics? What do you care about? And sometimes it's like, I want to do this. I want to make this skill. I want to do whatever. Other people, it's like, well, my coach wants me to add these skills, or wants me to do bars this year or something like that. So we reverse engineer what their goals and their wants are, and we drive that for them. So that's the only way I've developed buy-in, along with doing strength with my athletes. Literally, it's the only 2 things that have worked. So with that being said, in terms of what you can do to help them, the tiers of ideal, right, are going to be on campus, but that's not a thing, right? Second tier is really, really good place, or a strength and conditioning facility with high quality CSCS coaches or NSCA coaches, people who are qualified, who maybe are not really familiar with gymnastics, but they're willing to learn and they're willing to open their mind to do a strength and conditioning program for gymnastics. Because I'll be honest, I feel that Champion and many other facilities that I know of friends with are really the tip of the spear. Like what you guys are learning about is literally the like most forward thinking approach that I think we have right now based on all the elite and college programs I've worked with. So nobody really has a blueprint, but I think we have a decent place to start. So if you find a place back home where it's like, you know what, the strength coach is willing to work with me and do this, have them email me. They can have every program I've ever written for free. I will talk to them for free. I will give them everything, access to courses for free, because that is like that's like an ace in the hole. If you have someone who's willing to learn and do something new, then all they need is education and all they need is help. And I'm more than down to help that person. That's the next best option, is tell the girls, hey, if you can't make it on campus and you don't have anywhere that you can do this safely here, find somewhere at home that has a gym and has some respectable trainers that you can just go and either pay to work out for the summer or work something out where you clean the floors. Like we've literally had people who intern at strength conditioning gyms over the summer and sweep the floor so they can work out. So that's the next option. The next third option is making a much more simple, basic program to follow that still has all the big eggs in the basket, but they go to the gym and they do it on their own. They go to the weight room on their own and they get education from your strength coach over or Zoom or talks or stuff like that. But you have to make the program really easy for them, right? You can't be doing explosive med ball work that requires coaching and crazy crap like that. You have to do really basic stuff so that you can still get a lot, right? Split squats, hip lifts, regular squats. You can really get a good program with calf raises. Like you could probably add a little bit into there and still have a massive positive return on investment. So that's the next tier down, which is going to a gym in a weight room, Planet Fitness, something like that to do on your own. The last tier, if someone really struggles financially to get access to a place and doesn't have a place to do it, just do it in the gym, right? Just go to the gym and do whatever you can, right? Put a level 6 on your back and do squats, right? I've seen plenty of people do that, right? Do whatever you need to. And then 2 months later, when you get really, really strong, put a level 8 on your back or a level 10 on your back, right? Like I've seen plenty of places do that. So I think there's that option too as well. But again, buy-in is the most important. But yeah, those layers are really, really important. If you get down to the point where you have kids that want to work out really bad in their gym and they don't have access to facility or equipment, email me. I will write you a custom program with what they have available in their gym, because I care a lot about the health and safety and longevity of these athletes and seeing them perform now. And if they just need information and they just need help, then I'll donate all my time for free, because that's amazing for those athletes.
Dave, that's awesome. Thank you for that. We have a question from Lorenzo, who's actually coming in as JJ. So I guess Lorenzo's the strength and conditioning coach at Maryland. So that would be my guess. Gymnasts have a unique jump technique, the way they produce force both visually and on force plates, compared to that of a soccer player or a track and field athlete. From that perspective, do you try to coach general jump technique, or is this a specific skill of jumping for the sport that has been developed from years of gymnastics?
Really good question. This is phenomenal. And we actually have force plate data, the Vald plates that we use. We have the metrics from our people, but we're talking to like 6 or 7 other schools and getting these jump metrics compared. So the reason I think their jump metrics are different is because they've only known gymnastic specific bounding jumping for their entire life. There are 2 different things, just like the general bucket. You need to do your general strength and your gymnastic strength, your general power and your gymnastics power. You need to do general jumping and landing strength and conditioning training, and you need to do bounding and rebounding stuff. So you can see someone very clearly if they go like punch, 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 front tuck, stick. That's gymnastic specific, general, right? That landing, that squat pattern landing is proper general. So like last week, the wider the base, the higher the peak. So a lot of times if we coach somebody up on basic jump training and we give them basic jump strength and conditioning, their force goes through the roof, their power goes through the roof, because that's an untapped bucket, right? There's an opportunity there to get them really strong. So in the summer in the weight room, we teach them proper jump training, like mechanics. Some people jump differently, really low, squat depth with a higher amortization phase, really high jump. Some people have a different strategy. We see that a lot, but we do teach general jumping and landing mechanics. We also teach general jumping strength and power. We just teach them on the difference. We teach them like, hey, this is what you do in the general world, and when you're landing dismounts or landing floor routines or whatever, and then this is what you do gymnastics specific, the panel mat plyos, the deer jumps, the rebounds, the plyo stiffness drills. That's why I do them, because this skill of rebound and punching that you would need for a 1.5 layout or hitting the springboard is equally as valuable and as important as the general landing pattern you need. So that both need to be taught in the same way that an athlete needs to learn arch and hollow, but also a neutral position to land properly. I think that's why this conversation of why gymnasts need general aerobic training to help their specific event work, or they need general strength and conditioning to help their specific power down the road, right? This is the conversation that continues, is there's a benefit to both. There's a benefit to both. And it's a mind-boggling untapped potential in across the whole world of kids that have not been exposed to proper strength and conditioning when they're younger, because of myths and misunderstandings of it's going to make you bulky, you're going to lose your flexibility, you're going to get hurt. Things that, like in the 70s were like Eastern Bloc Russia, and now it still shows up as you're going to break your leg if you weight lift, right? So I think it's all misunderstanding. It's all just myth. And there's just like a massive, massive opportunity. That's why I teach you guys about it. Because if they see your programs doing it, the 12-year-olds come to me. I've got a 12-year-old elite today who had elbow surgery, and she's like ready to start lifting. So it's cool to see the trickle down.
Okay. Thank you. Bethany, what are your thoughts on in-season cardio?
Yes. So again, in the right context and setting, if you have communication with your strength coaches, it can definitely have a place for once per week. You are playing with fire though, because there's so much on their body already, right? The routines they're doing, the number of routines they're doing is really, really high. So if you can find a way to do it safely, right? Like to maintain, I don't think you're going to build their cardiovascular endurance, because hopefully that's happened in the preseason, but the same thing with doing in-season jump training or power training or strength training, you can maintain that high aerobic threshold or that high aerobic power output. So yes, I think once per week, there is a time and a place to do cardio in season, particularly if you're on a bye week and you want to maintain some of the fitness, important things going on with routines and prepping and mental preps and pressure sets that I don't know if it's the best use of your time, there are times when with strength coaches I've worked, so you'll come in and you'll set up, maybe they have a hard weekend, so maybe we'll do a 20-minute circuit with on the bike for 2 minutes. They hop off and do some core work or some flexibility work. They hop back on. They just keep the body moving for 20 minutes. That helps to get flush. And Monday morning, it's hard to get yourself going. So active recovery work is definitely another way that I think cardio can be used in season as a benefit and not another stressor on top of them.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right, we got one from Jake. What books would you recommend for strength and conditioning training, physiology, and gymnastics? Do you want to take a screenshot of your wall?
We grab a couple here, yeah. These ones are probably the best. Yeah, I think these are. So there's one more too that I don't know where it is, but Strength Conditioning by Anthony Comfort is really good. But yeah, these are some of the best ones. This one is amazing. This is the Strength Conditioning. Yep, I don't know, Marco Cardinale. This one is pretty good too, from the UK, Sports Performance. This is it. Anthony Turner. This book is amazing. Strength Conditioning.
Back it up. There you go.
There's where. Yeah, here we go. There we go.
Now we can see the author. Perfect.
Yeah. The best one though, I don't know where I have it. If you want a really heavy, there it is. This thing will take you 3 months to read. But the Physiology of Training for High Performance, this is like my Bible for physiology. So it has really in-depth charts and stuff like that, but it's really, really good to break down. If you're looking for like the geekiest of the geeky, yeah, you got to read this book. So I wrestled with these for probably like 2 years early, but those are the ones I would start with.
Very cool. All right. Any other questions for Dave while we have him on the clock here? Got a couple pop in here. All right.
I'll go on.
All right. Let's see. Melissa, what are your thoughts on isometric training for gymnasts?
Yeah, really good. Really good to do because really interesting. I don't know if I've said this before. So Dr. Sands' work on the spring floor in particular, we used to think that when they hit the spring floor, the calf was an eccentric contraction. So the muscle got longer as it contracted. Dr. Sands' research shows that it's actually an isometric contraction. So they hit the springs and they isometrically contract at an angle and the springs dip down, right? And then repel them back off. So it's not this big eccentric force. So we use eccentrics, but it's a really big role in like the Achilles in particular and isometrics for different areas of the body to work. So the way we incorporate them is what are called tempo pause sets. So 3 second lower, hold the bottom for 1 second, 1 second up, right? So like we'll do, again, the gold standard, I think something that everyone in gymnastics for our facility tries to get through is an elevated front foot and rear foot elevated tempo pause split squat. So you're on elevation with dumbbells in your hands, 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, hold the bottom for 1 second and then 1 second back up. It's awful. It's so hard to do, but it teaches that really end range of motion for switch leaps that you'll need. It does an isometric at end range to make their muscles work really hard at the end ranges there, but it works that tempo pause. And we do it also with calf stuff. So kettlebells or a dumbbell in your hand, push up on 2 legs, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, hold at the bottom range of motion, and then 1 second up. We think that tries to replicate some of the strength they need for their Achilles to be stronger. And then of course, plyometrics and that volume being slowly built up is another really important stuff. But it goes with JJ's question too, which says like, which exercises do you use to train the soleus? So seated calf raises off a 2-inch deficit. That's what we do tempo pause work, like a really heavy kettlebell on their knee. We also do bent knee tiptoe walks. So dumbbells in your hands, you're crouching down kind of like Velociraptor T-Rex, and your knees are bent, and you're up on high releve, and you're tiptoe walking with a bent knee, because that also helps to train the gastroc as well. And then any bent knee eccentric work. So like sprinting drills are oftentimes like something that's in this category, or doing some slow, heavy tempo walking, like in a split squat. So crouch split squat, that can also help develop some of the soleus stuff. But yeah, seated calf raises and tiptoe walks are probably my go-to. I love those things. Bent knee calf, leg press machines. That's kind of an obvious one too.
I have a question, and I'm sure some others are going to ask this. Where do you stand on conditioning before workout?
I just got asked this today. This is a great question. Okay, so I believe in it if you have a good rationale and understanding of the physiological underpinnings, right? So I'm not going to say where, who, what level, part of the world, right? I have literally gone to some training centers, and it is carnage before they get in the events. It is like 60 minutes of destroy the athletes before they get on events. And I don't like, what are you getting out of the workout besides just the grind of mental toughness? Maybe like you have to have a really intelligent thought process behind that. Okay. So I don't believe in burying someone before the events, because the events are so important and risky. But if you look at the physiology of explosive outputs and central nervous system dampening, this phenomenon of the nervous system ramping down as you do more explosive work, I think in the beginning of the practice, there is a huge opportunity to work on that, right? So what we'll do with people, and Nick and I agree with this, he works with a lot of he works like 13 or 20 federations, right? So warm up, general plyo stuff, line work for basics and tumbling, and then maybe you do like 3 to 5 passes of explosive jumps over barrels, right? Or blocks or stuff like that to work on that really high demand, that high explosiveness. So low volume, high intensity at the beginning of the workout, along with doing that general physical preparation work, like the hollow rocks, the leg lifts, the rope climbs, that daily does and that basic stuff. I personally believe that that is really good in the beginning. So doing all your general work and then doing your explosive jump work is good, but I don't think we should be doing 60 minutes of our strength at the beginning, because what's the goal? If it's off season, the goal is max strength. You want to make sure that you can put all your energy into that at the end of the practice. So you want to be pushing really, really hard. If the goal is the skill work and you need to really work on development of skills and progressions of technique, well, you're definitely not going to get a lot out of the end of the practice when somebody is completely dead. If you do a ton of strength work in the beginning and then you don't have the opportunity to really plan that out more, I mean, injury risk is one. So I get a little worried about that. So yeah.
Okay.
That's just, I don't know, did that help, or is that?
Yeah, no. It's one of those, there's the old school method of blowout conditioning at the end of practice. Then there was a generation of let's condition before practice. Then there's like, you use the word, the hybrid. Maybe a light conditioning before, like we've now turned the warm up into light conditioning and then going that way. But there's still some people who feel, back when I was a gymnast, we did blowout conditioning and then we trained, but
exactly. And again, I think that's, if I don't know how to say this politely. I have yet to come across someone who is very hardcore in that mentality. I say, okay, explain to me the physiology of what you're doing and why. And it doesn't ever end great. She's like, well, it's just like this and that and like mental toughness. I'm like, okay, I think I can develop mental toughness on an air assault bike way harder than, blowing someone's shins out and then asking them to go do floor routine. So I made that mistake, man. I used to do that. I used to do the exact same thing, an hour of conditioning and then go do the events and just be tougher. And I think all I got were shin splints and really resentful kids. So that's just my mistake, maybe my personal, but yeah, I don't think it's great. I think there's a time and place. I love the general conditioning, the gymnastic-specific daily does and stuff, the rope climbs, handstands, all that. I love that. And then doing maybe your plyos, your explosive work for the spring floor work. I think that's great, but I think past that it's
okay. Awesome. Lorenzo had a piggyback question on the isometrics.
Yep.
Thoughts on overcoming isometrics for gymnastics?
Yeah, time and a place. Again, when it's programmed into the right part of the season. So overcoming or isometrics, or some people call it contrast training, is like, you might do like a a bench press on a bar that can't move. It's just like you push as hard as you possibly can for maybe 5 seconds. And then you would do maybe like speed bench press work. And then maybe you would rest and do a bunch of stuff. But I think, again, time and a place, we do some contrast training with athletes. I think the problem here is that you need to typically have an athlete who has a high training age in the gym. So for a lot of gymnasts, they've never lifted until they come to college. And the first year is getting over the fear of lifting and doing it properly and learning the motions. The second year of lifting is actually getting a good training effect in. And then maybe by the third year, you have someone who's like, oh, I've got a training age that's high enough. So we've had athletes, like I said, Kylie and some other guys that have been there for 4 years. We're comfortable doing advanced work like that with them because we know they're not going to get, hurt doing a really, really high level movement. So time and a place. But in my personal experience, when we talk with college programs, they usually have 4 to 5 freshmen, 4 to 5 sophomores, a bunch of juniors who are experienced, and it's really hard to make an overcoming isometrics contrast training for the group that is conditioned, and then a basic program for this one over here, and then you have these 2 girls who have never lifted in their life, and you're like, this is where you put your feet to squat, right? Like there's only so much time in the weight room to do it. So generally, no, I would say it's good, yes, but generally from a feasibility point of view, it's tricky to thread that needle. Again, unless you have enormous buy-in and the girls get it and they're absolute beasts. I would say go for it if it has a time and place, particularly with jump training, we do it. So we would do the contrast training in their lower body, probably out of all the things.
Okay. Awesome.
Yep. And my parting advice to close is have the conversation that you want to have about strength conditioning. So Jay and I started this off 2 months ago. Have the conversation about what you want to do in May right now. Like, I know you're busy and season is crazy, but get a 2-hour coffee meeting. Be like, listen, I talked to this dude gave a presentation. I think some of the things he said might be cool. Like, you want to do those in May, you have to have the conversation now because your strength coaches need a couple months to wrap their head around it. You guys need a couple months to wrap your head around it too.
Awesome. Dave, thank you so much. Speaking for everybody in the room, since they can't speak, they can only type. I'm sure that they all appreciated the knowledge and the insight.